Boker Tov Chavrim, I'm Stephen Bernouning. You're watching Israeli News Live. We have breaking news. Israel is possibly preparing for a war that they realize is coming. And not just a war with Hezbollah, but I believe there may be another front, and that is the Syrian border, where Iranian troops have been for quite some time, even Russian troops as well, protecting Bashar al-Assad from the advancing forces of the Sunnis, of the Sunni nations, the Turkish and Saudi Arabia. We may have some breaking evidence for you on this. Just the other day, we were in the Golan with Pastor Paul Begley with his own YouTube channel, as well with his Coming Apocalypse television show there, helping him film, as well as we were covering news ourselves on the Syrian border with Israel. And while we were in this area, we found a huge number, unprecedented number of military equipment that Israel is using in the Golan, preparing to protect its own self, not just Hezbollah, but no doubt from the Golan side, a Syrian advancement as well. We may have the reason behind all of this as we share today's broadcast with you. So stay right here with us here as we move forward through this information. Now, the Jerusalem Post on the 16th of 2016, Lebanon will become a refugee state in the next Hezbollah war, says an IDF intel chief. He says here, says here in the article, Lebanon will become a state of refugees from which it will find difficult to recover if there is another war between Israel and Hezbollah, a senior IDF intelligence general said on Wednesday. The situation in the next conflict will be completely different. We are stronger than we have ever been and are able to deal with any threat. And the head of the IDF military intelligence, Major General Herzi Halevi, made this statement here. Again, it was on the Jerusalem Post. That is today this came out. The same article goes on to say, turning to the topic of Iran, Halevi stated, in the next wars, the majority of weapons that will attack Israel will be Iranian products. Now notice, he didn't say Russian products, but Iranian products. But of course, Iran gets its weapons from Russia as well. Saudi Arabia is not the same country we once saw just a year and a half ago. They have a new king and are leading the Sunni camp in the Middle East. See? Now, I made a note here, this makes Israel an opposition to Russia by aligning themselves with the Saudi Arabia. Why? Because Russia is backing the very country that is trying to topple Syria, and that's Saudi Arabia as well as Turkey. So Israel, even though they have been trying to keep some type of peace agreement with Russia, also finds itself at odds with Russia by aligning themselves with all of Russia's enemies. And of course, Israel is trying to walk that fine line between the United States, between Russia, and at the same time making their stand against the two-state solution, as we brought out in several broadcasts here recently, after we saw, one, that a two-state solution indeed was signed. Shimon Tov bringing this information out. We've done 2 broadcasts on that already. And as well as we saw that Yehuda Glick, when I was filming the interview for Pastor Begley there, we find out that Yehuda Glick stated that there is no more two-state solution. So Israel is finding itself more and more alienating itself away from the world. Now, I think that's a good thing personally, but Israel might as well get ready to roll up its sleeves and fight, which is exactly what I believe they're getting ready to do. Now, let's move on in this right here. In another article, Al Jazeera just came out a few days ago. Russia in search of a new strategy in Syria. Now, this is where I believe the reasoning behind Israel's buildup of forces. In fact, when this was coming out, right after that, I was in the Golan Heights there in Syria, right as all this information is breaking. And no wonder why Israel needs to beef up its Syrian border. Watch what the statements are. For the second time in months, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has said, we will fight on to liberate every inch of our land. Friends, that includes the Golan Heights. Do you realize Israel and Syria are technically still at war? Over what? Since 1967, when Israel liberated the Golan Heights from Syrian hands because it technically belongs to Israel according to biblical mandate, even according to the British mandate. But Syria won this during the War of Independence, and they've kept this land ever since. But in Bashar al-Assad's sights, this happens to be his land, and he's going to fight for every inch. Now watch what the article says. The last time Assad made a similar statement, he was scolded by the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, who said that this was not in line with the Kremlin's policies. Okay, at the time it wasn't. Russia was pushing for a political settlement and was involved in efforts with the United States to bring about a cessation of hostilities and to create a conducive atmosphere for peace talks. Again, Al Jazeera, June 11th, Russians search for a new strategy in Syria. But this time around, however, Assad has so far not been told off. In other words, Russia has not scolded him about fighting for every inch of land. Why? Because the NATO and their own allies, led by the Western powers, the United States, has not been willing to work with Russia. So now Russia is turning to who? To Iran. It's turning around and looking at China. He's looking at his own partners here to back Bashar al-Assad. He's not going to back down. And undoubtedly, he's going to help Assad to gain every inch of ground, which is going to include the Golan at the very final stage. All right? Instead, Russia sent its defense minister to Iran's capital, Tehran, to take part in talks with his Syrian and Iranian counterparts. Before the meeting, which took place on Iran's initiative, the Russian defense minister said the officials would be discussing reinforcing cooperation in the fight with ISIL, and of course al-Nusra as well. Now, let's look a little bit further in the article right here. It says, yes, it seems that they have found common ground for the time being, particularly at a time when Moscow's deep disagreements with the U.S. are in the open. It looks like Russia's initial idea to forge a global alliance on the war on terror didn't work, because that's what Putin exactly had done. He was trying to galvanize a worldwide move to stop ISIS, be it in Europe, be it in Syria, be it in the Middle East, be it in Russia, United States, everywhere. Russia, President Vladimir Putin has been trying to forge an alliance that did not have all these ambitions for global dominance. But he sees that no one in NATO is really interested, except with perhaps the possibility of the French. The French have voted recently to drop the sanctions against Russia. But then again, the French also sent in special forces into Syria. What side is the French really on? No one really knows, all right? So Russia repeated an offer that both coalitions, the Russian-led and U.S.-led coalitions, should unite since they are facing the same enemy. Was not given any prominence in the U.S., Sergei Strokhan, a political analyst in Moscow, said that he was being quoted on this. So what do we have? Now we have Israel beefing up their own security forces. Now, when we were in the Golan just a couple of days ago, we noticed one thing. There were three huge buildup of forces there, and they were not even. You see this one here in a little fenced-in area here on your screen there. But remember, Bashar al-Assad has said, we will fight on to liberate every inch of our land. But what I'm about to share with you in a few moments here, after we look at another article on Breaking Israel News there, is that Israel is building up its own forces in the Golan because it knows that it's about to face an attack, not just from Hezbollah, but someone's going to hit them from also the Syrian side. And remember, Hezbollah was working with the Iranian generals here just about a year or so ago when the Israelis bombed a car that had both Hezbollah chief in there as well as an Iranian general in there, looking at ways to attack Israel from the north. Now, Russia, I do not believe, will go directly involved in there, but they're going to give air support for this strike. They're going to try to take back the Golan. And Israel knows this as well. So Israel is preparing for that fight, and it must be nearing that time because Israel would not have this type of power up in its own borders. Now, what you're seeing there is nothing. I'm about to share with you a video that I took myself right there in the Golan, and this was only one of 3 different areas the exact same way right there in the Golan, and I'm only on one highway. This has nothing to do with other parts there in the Golan where other forces no doubt are built up as well. Let's continue on here, friends. It says here, this is backing up just a little bit in time. On April the 24th, 2016, Netanyahu to Putin, Israel will keep the Golan with or without a deal. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Russian President Vladimir Putin a face-to-face meeting in Moscow on Thursday that Israel would not relinquish the Golan Heights. The meeting marked 25 years of Israeli-Russian relations. Israel has clear red lines for self-defense. Netanyahu told Putin, according to a statement released by the Prime Minister's office, "We act at the best of our ability to prevent the transfer of advanced weaponry from Iran to Syria to Hezbollah and Lebanon," he said. Again, this was on Breaking Israel News there. The link there is at the bottom of the screen for those of you that want to copy it down. I have to tell you though, friends, this is about to turn very bad because Israel is not going to be playing around, not at all. Now, I want to share with you right here, let me see if I don't know if I can actually forward the video here, but in just a moment here, you're going to see on your screen, this is unprecedented what we saw here in the Golan Heights. Again, as I want to state to you, this was only one of 3 Israeli build-up forces in the Golans that we witnessed personally ourselves. And you're about to see this hit your screen. This is a whole row of tanks on this particular group we saw there. Must have been about a dozen tanks. I think in all we did see 50 tanks in the Golan. Armored personnel carriers, everything there. And this is not just 1 or 2. We're talking about more than about 20 armored personnel carriers. There were about 8 or 9 tanks at this location here. It was everywhere that you were looking. We were seeing this. The tents there, etc. Israel is preparing for a major offensive, and they're preparing it there in the Golan. Not just up on the border with Hezbollah, which is quite a few kilometers away from that position there, but we're talking about the Syrian. This is a build-up near the Syrian border. Israel is digging in. They're getting ready to hold their ground. I expect they must be feeling that a war is coming. Israel just does not amass troops on its borders for no reason at all. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Shalom.